Ron, a good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Thompson, a principal cloud solution architect, AI architect in our financial services area in Microsoft. I focus on banking primarily, so of interest to my customers, of interest to me, is really how to mitigate and manage risk with your generative AI applications. And we've thought about it, and we've come up with an answer called Azure AI Foundry. We'll talk about it, some of the mitigations, how you can use that to help mitigate and secure and build safety into your generative AI solutions. Our topic table of contents today, we'll talk about Azure AI Foundry, talk about securely deploying AI Foundry, and then talk about a few use cases centered around Azure AI Foundry. First slide here really is the reality of this, and this is true with every customer I work with. About 14% of customers go from POC to production. It's just a fact. People want to experiment, they want to ideate, they spend a lot of money on research, but never make it to production. 74% of organizations in the Gen AI planning and experimentation phase. So we're experimenting with things, not necessarily getting business value out of them. We're still trying to learn. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of, legal and compliance and governance teams that kind of put the nix on some of these. And last, really, lack of developer tool sets. Cost outstripping ROI goals, which is a big one. Pick the right use cases, infrastructure performance, availability, poor IT and business coordination, right? Finding the right use case and being able to work with the business to have a use case that returns something back to them, either reducing cost or adding value from just an efficiency perspective. And that's the reality we live in. Some common generative AI application development challenges here. One, to Ron's point, right? Selecting, customizing, swapping deployment and models. How do I pick the right model? How do I deploy it? How do I switch to a new model if I want to test or try it out and not be locked into a specific model? I've got customers building their own sort of wrappers around every model out there, and they have a generic payload going into it, and they'll kind of multiplex into whatever model they're using to give them that ability. Complex and manual and time-consuming workflows with minimal automation, new attack methods. So those are growing, expanding as we build more of these, as we learn more of these generative AI, build more of these applications. We have more harmful and unreliable content and just new attacks coming at them. Lack of observability and governance in production. So how do I observe whether my application is, deviating or skewing and not giving the right answers? And then tool sprawl. There's lots of tools. We have a lot of tools. How do I pick the right tool? How do I stick to a tool? How do I manage all this tool sprawl with all the generative AI applications that I'm building? With that, Microsoft just came out with this AI Foundry about a year ago. We kind of came out with the marketing for this, and this is sort of our answer and our solution to some of these complexities and risks around building generative AI solutions and applications. And so what is this AI Foundry thing? AI Foundry is a couple of things, many things in one. As Ron mentioned, it is a URL up here, a landing zone, ai.azure.com, where you can get all of our Azure AI tools, not just generative AI, but our traditional classical task-based models for vision, for NLP, for document extraction, things like that. But shifting over to the left, all of your favorite tools, Copilot Studio, Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, GitHub, and the Azure AI Foundry SDK are the components you can leverage and tools you can leverage. So pick your favorite tool, and it's compatible with Azure AI Foundry. Azure AI Foundry, again, is a landing spot. It's a website, but it's also a software developer kit. So you can do code first or low code if you like. So we offer a couple of different options depending on where you're at. There's playgrounds. There's lots of different ways to go and experiment on new use cases. But let's start now in the middle up on top, our model catalog. To Ron's point, we have over 1,800 open source models in our model catalog. Foundational models, open source models, task-specific models. And we also have some industry-specific models that you can go pick, deploy to a managed endpoint, and voila, you have an API you can talk to a model and quickly swap those out with various different APIs and SDKs we have built. We have our flagship model, Azure OpenAI Service. We've got our Azure AI Search Service, which is our answer to how do I perform RAG-based patterns? How do I find the right content for RAG and then do generation with that content? We've built a brand new fill-in preview Azure AI Agent Service to help you build agents with a new buzzword around agentic. Azure Content Safety, the important topic for our conversation today. These are safety tools and APIs and components to help you secure and feel safer and help your governance teams feel better about your deployment of your applications because you have safety now built into your applications. And last, Azure Machine Learning is our platform that this is all really foundationally built on. Additional tools, evaluations, we'll talk about what those are. You can customize, we've got governance built in, monitoring, and then again, all that under the observability platform to be able to observe some really cool features there around tracing different calls for auto function calling in Azure OpenAI, all of those cool things you want to be able to trace and debug to see how my application's working. Double-clicking and expanding our Azure AI Foundry ecosystem. If you look at the top, again, the best models, best-in-class models, 1,800 plus and counting. DeepSeek's in there now. Any model you can think of, Mistral, Llama, they're all available. So our approach isn't that we only have Azure OpenAI. We have all these models available for you for your specific needs. Azure OpenAI is probably the best in terms of quality, but there might be a reason you want to pick a smaller model or a different model for a different use case. We let you do that through AI Foundry. In the middle, we have our agent toolkit. So connectivity, connected fabric to all of our first-party offerings like SharePoint, Blob Storage, Redis Cache, all these different components. Cosmos DB is a big one, SQL database, everything in our ecosystem you can connect through with an agent. And also third-party offerings like LangChain and Llama Index, and some of those are also available, connectable through the SDK, through the AI Foundry ecosystem. Performance monitoring, we have Azure Monitor, as well as some third-party integrations to help monitor and manage your AI, Gen AI applications. And at the bottom, really the trustworthy AI. We'll focus on that here today. Content safety, Defender, Azure Policy, various different components to help protect and safeguard your generative AI applications through trustworthy AI. So, why? Generative AI introduces a lot of new risks that we didn't really have to think about before. Some of these aren't new. Jailbreaks, prompt injection are very similar to SQL injection attacks. But the new one is really this ungrounded outputs and errors. And as Madhav mentioned before about grounding your data, grounding your application in your own data, how do I know when I've given it documents, right, to generate an answer with, how do I know it got it right? How do I know the grounding was correct? We have different things you have to think about when you're talking about these Gen AI applications, because even though you ground it properly, it may not give you the right answer. So kind of being aware of, hallucinations and then making things up. Jailbreaks, harmful content and code, generating harmful content. Copyright infringement, making sure you're not generating content that might get you sued down the road. And then manipulation and human-like behavior. So the question becomes, how human-like do we want these to be? And at what point do we want to make them less human-like? And we want them to sound like a human, but there's also risks in that. So thinking about these various different new risks that come with generative AI applications. Within Azure, we have a trustworthy AI. We have a platform. We have a trustworthy AI sort of platform. So as you're embarking and building your generative AI applications, be thinking about how you're going to safeguard and protect them. And that should be something done at the very beginning of your project, not at the end. So as you start thinking about what do I need to do to make this thing safe and securable, and what bounds and guardrails do I put around it, utilize our built-in AI safety tooling to detect harmful content, protect against PII, safeguard against these attacks, safeguard against hallucinations, and protect it and no material and bias. So as you start looking, and again, Azure AI Foundry is what provides these tools for you to mitigate these risks. And in addition, I'll step back again. We have our trusted AI solutions as well. We have a whole 6 tenets of trustworthy AI you can look up. We have our own foundational rules and guidelines and guardrails internally around how we manage new applications from a generative AI perspective to help safeguard those. All right, so responsible AI is iterative, right? So you define your use case. First thing you need to do is red team. What does that mean? That means I think of all the different risks that might come out of my solution, and I may do penetration testing and trying out different things to break it. And once you've identified all these things I want to break or could potentially break or make my application unsecure, I want to then measure how often will it happen, what's the risk of them happening, what's the probability of them happening, and then once you've identified all that, you go through the mitigation cycle of how do I mitigate this? Do I do prompt engineering? Do I use an AI safety API to maybe do a groundedness check before I send a response back to an end user to make sure they're getting a grounded response? And then monitoring the piece that everybody misses. How do I monitor and operate and take all that data, the question answering, and feed that into a system to make sure you're watching what's going on so your model doesn't deviate. So your application over time maybe doesn't deviate, and continuous improvement, just very similar to the MLOps life cycle that Matt Alf mentioned in the last session. But keeping that in mind, the entire life cycle is important. Always start and keep on going in that circle to keep and help protect your solution. Again, Azure AI Foundry is sort of the answer and the toolkit to really help you do this. So looking here, we have your user prompt and your application. I build my application, I ground it with my data. I use Azure or Microsoft Purview to protect and govern and classify my data, so I'm not putting PII into my prompt. And then I also use content safety to do things like filtering out content. Maybe I do groundedness checking, maybe I do PII filtering, whatever it is you want to build, have that safety system in place. So before anything goes to your model, it's being filtered. And that will help protect you against, again, PII leakage into a model or PII leakage somewhere. Finally, you go into the models in our Azure AI Foundry model catalog. We've partnered with HiddenLayer to scan every single model that we have. So model scanning happens in every model. You're guaranteed that they're safe. And then last but not least, monitoring with Microsoft Defender, again, all the way back to the front. Mitigation layers to be considering as you build your application. What the user is really in charge of is UX, the UI experience, right? Design it so people can't abuse it, design it so it's easy, design it so people don't mistakenly do something that they shouldn't do. And it's really about also defining what the application should do. System message and grounding, obviously super important. Safety message, that's where AI Foundry comes in. We have built-in safety messages. We have built-in safety systems to help you construct a safety a system message that's safe and can protect your inputs and outputs. There's also the Azure Content Safety that can help protect via API calls, content going into the model. And then again, choosing, to Ron's point, the right model for the right job. Don't always have to go with Azure OpenAI. Don't always have to go with Llama. Don't have to go with whatever model. The model catalog is there. Pick what makes sense for your use case. If it's a high-risk use case, I would say probably use Azure OpenAI, probably GPT-4o, because that's going to be the best results, more grounded results, and maybe a lower, a smaller model, if you will. So choosing the right model is also important to mitigate those risks. Mitigation layers in Azure AI Foundry, again, system messaging layer, right, to help you really get that system message tuned and working and effective. The system safety layer, that's all the APIs, all the filtering, content blocking, risky prompts, things like that we can filter prior to it going to the model. And then again, the model itself, making sure you pick the right model, fine tune if you need it, if it makes sense, and continually doing performance checks and validation and that continuous operation. Here's an example of how this might look in real time. So user prompts, You have your system message, your grounding data. We hit Azure AI search, get the content, get the results, modify the prompt, right? If I'm doing an API call to our content safety, I'm going to take my system message, my question, and all my context, send that to my Azure Content Safety service to say, is there PII? Is there anything harmful in here? Are we trying to do an injection attack? Are we trying to break the model? Yes, no. If so, we then return back and say, it can't go, won't work. And so we help protect you from people trying to abuse the system. Modified prompt, filter prompt goes into the model, and then your response comes back. So Azure Content Safety, a part of Azure AI Founder, is a key component you should incorporate to help with things like, again, groundedness checks. There's lots of other things we can do with that from a safety perspective. Evaluations. So what are evaluations? So generative AI applications are non-deterministic by nature. And so you can't do unit testing and say, I expect a 5 come out, I run my unit test, and a 5 comes out, yeah, I'm working. With these, it's a little more nuanced and complicated. So as you start thinking about putting your a system into production and testing it, you want to make sure that you build, if you don't have quality data sets, you can use other tools in AI Foundry to generate a synthetic data set. But get those data sets, get the metrics you want to use, evaluate this stuff systematically, right? Build a process to evaluate things before you move them into production, and have users take a look at them. Have the business partner actually look at the results to make sure what your metrics are showing, what the answers are actually accurate and grounded, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about what those evaluations look like next. All right, so evaluations, so assessing your app with Azure AI Foundry. Again, upfront, either build test data if you have quality data from your business users with a question answer pair. Great. If you don't, use our generation tool to generate test data for risk and safety. It can actually generate harmful content to verify and validate your application won't accept harmful content. And then using our evaluators, and we'll get into those, and the Azure OpenAI model together, evaluate the results, and then spit out some reports and look at it and see if it meets your needs. And if the metrics aren't above the threshold you expect, maybe you got to step back and do some additional looking at your maybe grounded data. Maybe your system message needs to be updated or modified, improved. But these will give you insights into how well your application is going to work going in the future. So evaluation is super critical, super important, and we make it easy in Azure AI Foundry through an SDK. In addition to the Azure AI.azure.com, there's evaluations from a UI perspective there, but the software developer kit has built-in classes in Python. You can execute to do all this groundedness check and all these evaluations and en masse to check and validate the quality of your generative AI application. The built-in and custom evaluations. We have built-in evaluations, coherence, groundedness, relevance are just a few. We've also got some traditional metrics we can look at. You can also build your own. So if you want to build your own metric, it's simply building a prompt and incorporating that into our APIs to then be able to have your own sort of evaluation you can then run. So within AI Foundry, we give you this great UI where you can run these mass evaluations through prompt flow, and then we'll spit out the reports, and you can see visually where everything landed for that particular prompt, for that particular RAG pattern, and you can kind of view this over time to see how things are operating. You can run it through, maybe make some tweaks, right, to your system message, come and try again, see if it improves, and iterate through that using this visual interface or through the software developer kit. We provide both mechanisms for you to use. Automated evaluations, right? Automate this stuff, have systems that take and automate this in mass, in batch, so that you actually have data you can show your governance team, your security teams that, hey, we evaluated, things look good, here's the metrics, and you continue to do that. What's nice is that becomes a baseline as you roll into production, as you then come back around and start looking at enhancing your solution. You can then take and run those evaluations again with maybe improved data sets, for example, and then compare your answers. And if it's better, great, you've improved the solution. If it's not, you step back and say, what happened, what broke, what changed. If I'm swapping models out, evaluations are a great way of detecting which models work better. Does Azure OpenAI GPT-4o work? Do I want to go GPT-4o Mini? Is that going to be faster and as good as GPT-4o? So which ones do I pick, and how do I know what is the best? And evaluations can really help you figure out which model works the best for your situation. Every scenario is different. Every data set's different. So having these data sets and evaluations per solution will help give you confidence that you're not going to have issues moving into production and productionalizing your application. Again, a big blocker we talked about at the beginning, a lot of banking customers are nervous and scared about rolling in. They're nervous about this generating bad answers. This can help give them a level of confidence that you actually have things under control. You know what it's producing. It's grounded, it's working, and their numbers, and they can look at those and feel confident that you're doing the right thing and help get over some of those legal and governance hurdles. Automated evaluations, again, we have several built-in evaluations. AI-assisted metrics really ground in this: coherence, fluency, relevance, retrieval, similarity. We also have NLP metrics. We have an F1 score, a Blue score, a Rouge score. All the metrics there are available out of the box in AI Foundry. Risk and safety, we have hate and unfairness, sexual violence, self-harm, protected materials checks via an API call. You can simply, here's my prompt, here's my results coming back. Is this thing violating any of those particular safeguards? Direct attack jailbreaks, indirect attack jailbreaks, that's built in. So if you don't want to worry about jailbreak attacks, you can use this API, just an API call, prior to going into the LLM and say, is this a potential jailbreak attack? If so, don't let it go through. And then again, customize. You can customize your own metrics, build your own as you see fit with the Azure AI Evaluation SDK I mentioned earlier, software developer kit that has all these components built in that you can then out of the box call with code, or you can build your own. And moving on to secure deployment of
Chris?
Azure AI. Yes.
We just got a few minutes. I want to make sure we finish up and give Tom some chance to talk about ransomware.
I'm done. Yeah, I'll be done in like 2.
Okay.
All right, cool. So Azure AI Foundry private links. So we have private links. All of this is protected, secure by design, secure out of the box. It's fully secured, private networking, no public access, no public endpoints, no data traversing the public internet. So just know AI Foundry is safe, protected, and good to go there. Some common use cases here. Again, I won't drain this. You'll have the slide deck, you'll have the recording. Build your own agents, chat with your data, summarization, very common use cases for AI Foundry. High-level architecture here, right? Pick your model, add your index. And what's great about Foundry is there's some WYSIWYG tools that let you do this and experiment quickly without having to write a bunch of code. And that's the benefit it brings to you, is that quick, low code, time to market, testing, evaluation, see if something's actually going to work. Here's an example. There's a link there. We'll let you have that in the slide deck. And a speech analytics, a big use case in banking is transcription, post-call transcription. This sort of shows you how you can do this with Azure AI Foundry. I won't go into that, but you can see the slide. If you have questions, ping me. And that's it. Links to the SDK, AI Foundry, and some documentation and learning courses. Thank you.